I was surprised. I thought you were going to be like, no, all natives.
No, guilty as charged. I also
No.
like putting my hands in the dirt. I like
That's the
changing
thing.
my front.
Like, I love planting. Yeah.
Yeah, I like my front containers in front of our front door. Changing it out a little bit. I do have red twig dogwoods in the front of my door.
There you go.
As well.
There you go.
And then the surrounding plants, I usually put in some kind of seasonal color, some pumpkins or something from the fall. Fun stuff. But again, it's that balance, and I think that's a great idea. What you said about just going online and saying, what is a New York native version of X plant? Like, that's a great thing. Like, it doesn't take an education to do that. If you just had this plant in mind, you could just Google it,
Yeah.
Like,
there's a lot of resources out there.
There's so many. Like, a lot of people are super passionate about it. This isn't a new topic by any means, so that's a super great way to start. Even if you don't, like you said, land on it every time, that effort, and like over time, you're just gonna gain more knowledge, and you're gonna end up with a lot healthier ecosystem in your own backyard. You're gonna see more pollinators. It's gonna be easier to maintain.
Thank you for joining the John Minnie podcast, where we explore all things urban horticulture. I'm your host, Mark Minnie. I'm the president of John Minnie Distinctive Landscapes, which is a firm with a purpose to make places beautiful by bringing nature to the places people live, work, and play. Today, I sit down with Chris Giovanni. He's an estimator at John Minnie and native plant guru. Chris and I sit down for a combo on native plants in the landscape trade. Today's chat is part of our Cherish Nature series, where we grapple with topics of sustainability within the landscape and horticulture industry. All right, without further ado, let's head over to my full conversation with Chris.
Welcome to the John Minnie podcast. I'm here with Chris Giovanni, your key player, estimator at John Minnie Distinctive Landscapes. You've been with us like about 7 years now, right? Is that accurate? Cool.
7 years.
Hell yeah. And I'm pumped to be here with you. Welcome.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here.
I'm going to start by so we're talking about native plants in the landscape trade, right? Generally. Mm-hmm. You love native plants, and Definitely. I'll give some context on that. I love native plants too. We were just joking about how we're going to argue, but I think we're going to be aligned on a lot of things. So why do you love native plants so much?
I first noticed that I liked plants a lot in college because I used to walk home from class and pass this small florist shop that had a small growing operation in a greenhouse out front. And I used to walk in there almost every day and just smell the smells of the plants and look at all the beautiful arrangements they were making, similar to the ones that our Florida core team does now so well. And I just loved the light shining through the glass in a cold, snowy day. And after a while, eventually the guy that owned it just said, "Hey, do you want a job?" And I was like, "Sure." So I started working there, and I was helping propagating plants. And that was kind of the first touch of me noticing just how much I connected with plants specifically. I'd always been really outdoorsy, but that really just helped my interest grow and snowball from there. And at this point, years into my career, I guess to sum it up, I would say I love native plants because when I look at a native ecosystem, it just gives me the experience of looking at a physical manifestation of balance and health. It seems like everything is all together as it should be. It's very peaceful and calming. It's a beautiful thing. I love thinking about all the fascinating and intricate connections that all the native species have with each other.
Man, that's awesome. It's beautiful. So when you're talking about how it makes you feel like there's balance, I feel like that's a perfect segue to like what makes native plants so important. But before we do that, what is a native plant?
It's a funny thing to look at a plant and give it a title, almost like good plant, bad plant. But we'll get into that later.
Now you're getting a little feisty. So you're saying that what, non-native plants are bad plants?
No, not necessarily. We'll get into it. But as a general definition, a native plant is a plant species that naturally occurs in a specific geographic region or ecosystem. And it has evolved over thousands of years and adapted to the local climate, soil conditions, and other factors. These plants are considered an integral part of the local ecosystem, and they form relationships with other plants, animal, fungi, and microorganisms.
Okay, so why? What makes them so important for those I think you can riff with some of those points off that definition.
Yeah. So I mentioned the local ecosystem and how it forms relationship with other, plants and animals. All of those connections rely on one another, different types of relationships. A lot of people have heard of symbiotic relationships as one example. They're all linked together and require one another in order to survive on their own. So these ecosystems are one big system. So if you're missing a piece in the puzzle, if you lose native plants, then the whole system begins to crumble.
Yeah, that's really, I like that. It's like Jenga, if you're playing Jenga, right? Like the tower is intact and it's so sturdy, right? When it's undisrupted. But if you start pulling out blocks, it gets more and more fragile until it crumbles apart, right?
Yeah, you can only pull out so many until it tumbles.
So how are we messing with that? What are the other types of plants in this framework? How are we categorizing?
Well, if we want to break down the other, definitions of different types of plants, we usually like to think of it as there's native plants and then there are non-native plants. So every plant that is not native is non-native plant, and then within that subgroup there are some plants that are considered invasive species. So not all non-native plants are invasive, but all invasive plants are non-native. Does that make sense? It's a little tongue twister.
No,
I love words all at once.
No, I think you actually said it very clearly. So yes, I get it. So you have your native plants. Everything else is
not native,
not a native plant, right?
Yes.
And then, but within that, we characterize it because we're talking about the landscape trade, and at John Minnie, we're introducing a lot of plants into whatever ecosystem we're touching, and you kind of want to know, is it native? But if it's not native, what's the implications of that? Now you can break it down a little bit more. Then there's native invasive, which is probably the naughtiest of them all, right? And then you have non-native but non-invasive. But back to that puzzle piece I threw out Jenga analogy. Is anything non-native kind of taking chips at that framework to our...
That's an interesting question. Like everything else, it's hard to say everything's black and white. We do have quite the issue of displacing natural habitat right now. So I would say it is very important to promote native species, but to say that, native fauna don't have any benefit from non-native species, I don't think that would be accurate. Pollinators can still utilize species that are non-native. So there's certainly some benefit. I would say, as long as you're planting something and it's not invasive, you're doing a lot better than putting another parking lot in,
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's not that black and white. So non-native, non-invasive, is it okay? Yeah, we want greenery, but in technicality, you probably just need to do a ton of research to really understand what the implications of any plant that isn't native is going to do to the local ecosystem. And that's why I love the word you used earlier. Is natives have done that research for you over thousands and thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
There's no research there. It's this nature works when it's native and left to its own devices.
They're all quite literally connected physically in every way that you could think of, even in threads that you can't necessarily see with the naked eye. So disrupting those threads can be not so great.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't even know how not great or what.
Yeah, it's usually delayed reaction. You don't know how invasive a species is until you look down the highway and you're like, wow, that's a lot of Japanese knotweed.
Yeah, that's a good point. But all right, so now I think we're shifting towards real, our world application, which is just planting something better than putting a parking lot down, right? But maybe that's an extreme example, but we're dealing as a business, and many other people out there, want to garden or put green spaces in around them or in their spaces. They have to make these decisions, and it's often driven by the client, right? So how do we balance client requests, whatever they be and what their vision is and their preferences, with a strategy, like let's say, to maybe integrate and use more native planting?
Yeah, it certainly is a balance. Our industry is really awesome because we create these really unique and beautiful green spaces that people enjoy, and it's very important not to lose sight of that enjoyment, that wonder, and that really lovely feeling of walking through a lush green space. So that is of course a high priority when you're dealing with customers. We're not just here to solely repopulate the earth with native species. We're also trying to get people to interact with greenery and make places better. Even just planting anything is helping against the urban heat island effect. So
That's true.
There's benefits there. I think when you're talking about balance and how we attack, client expectations versus as many natives as possible, I think it starts with what we've been doing a little bit here which is education series for our peers, making sure that we as an industry know what we're talking about, and so we can make educated decisions on which plants we're using. There's a lot of beautiful native species that have ornamental value, and they can be placed in a client's space and make a beautiful garden for them. And if a client wants something else, certainly, it's up to the client, it's their space, but we can be there as that person that could kind of guide them and teach them about what the options are. I think a lot of people nowadays are really interested in native species anyway, so it's not a hard sell to tell somebody, hey, this is also really good for hummingbirds.
That's education. Agreed 100%. And like some of the things we're doing is educating our people on the front lines who are talking to the customers, right? So it's like they just need the education on a few things. Why natives, right? Then like, how does it play in with design, I guess? Like, what are some tactics we can use when we're talking to a client maybe to help, I don't know, what's the best words I'm looking like, have a higher portion of natives used in the landscape execution and design, right?
I created essentially a guide where I came up with examples of some invasive species that our trade tends to use, and then I provided 2 examples of a native species that may be a good substitution, depending on if you're looking at
was
light
it 2?
conditions.
I feel like there were like even in some cases like
there could be more.
Yeah.
So it's there's different examples. Did you pick that invasive species because of the form or the color, the fall color, or the light that you have? Is it evergreen? So there's different reasons why you'd pick a plant. So I chose to give a couple different examples, and that's available to our team. We also have an internal guide that includes some information about which plants we have available that are native, so you can sort this internal spreadsheet that we have by native plants, which might be helpful, and choosing those firsthand. So just kind of providing those resources, I think, to the team is a good thing. It's a good first step.
Yeah, I learned a lot when you did that, because the way, and the reason I'm digging down to like what we do, because I feel like it's something a lot of people in design, landscape designer, landscape trade could benefit from an approach like that. Because when I watched you present it that way, like I had that moment. I was like, that's awesome. Like you in theory, you could have been like, here's a 1-to-1, like here's one native for one invasive, or one invasive for one non-native. Like it's kind of what I would have anticipated, but instead it was like, here's one invasive. Then you gave multiple options for it, and I was like, well, that's pretty powerful, because invasives have generally become prevalently used maybe in the landscape trade for a very specific function, or maybe because it has, that one invasive has 3 or 4 functions. So maybe it was introduced because it's really great for low maintenance, but also, sun and wind blocking or whatever, all these different features. So, but when you showed it that way, I was like, there are so many options that we can offer up as alternatives. So there's plenty of ways to cut through and find out what is that intention in the design, what is the function you're trying to achieve, and there are several alternatives that you can consider. And I think that was like a very powerful way of thinking about it. So kudos to you, man.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Any other thoughts like on tools to equip? I think I'm framing it mostly in that, hey, you're in the landscape trade. You're, somebody who works on cultivating or installing or, um, building landscapes, probably out in the front lines, meaning like you're in sales, you're talking to the client or design, and you have to come up with the solutions. Any tools or tips or tricks you can share?
New York State has this really awesome PDF that just lists a huge amount of native species, and they seem to focus on ones that are generally used in the landscape trade, which is helpful because obviously there's thousands of native plants, and not all of them are going to be cultivars or species that you can actually get from a nursery. So that's one thing that's really helpful if you're just interested and you want to just look it up. I would recommend that. It's literally just called New York State Native Species.
Yeah.
It's a PDF that you can find. It's one of the first things on Google. So I've referenced that a lot. It's got images and some more information on it. Just there's some really cool books out there. I don't know if you've heard of Doug Tallamy. He's this author who's an ecologist he's also a professor at the University of Delaware.
Okay.
He's written 2 books that I really like. One's called Nature's Best Hope, and another is called Bringing Nature Home.
Awesome.
And those are more for the homeowner, because we were talking about more of our industry. But if you're looking to as like a homeowner or just in your own time, those 2 books give you some really great legwork on how to integrate native species in your home, why it's important, how to start small. It's like a realistic and really sensible approach to planting native species.
That's awesome. And I love that you're sharing like resources that we can take away. But go back to the New York State thing. So that's an interesting point. So we're here, we're in New York State, and obviously our playground is like New York City. But I guess we got to emphasize like the need. Obviously, any of our listeners might be in any other geographic area. So I think the key is like research, right? Like you got to do research at the local level. Obviously about like what are those native plants in your area is obviously the most obvious research, but then it also shifts my mind to like why and how important is ongoing research just about native plants important?
It's important because we discover more native species all the time. We also discover more invasive species all the time. We discover different relationships between native species all the time too. Yeah, pretty frequently.
I feel like they change these lists more and more because we get better at like science and research, right?
It's pretty cool. It's a balance between the scientific community. There's governmental bodies involved, and then even industries like ours kind of put their voice in there. It's kind of a group effort. We're all trying to figure it out together all the time by just observing around us and noticing how plants behave, how they spread, how they interact with other species. So it's interesting stuff. It's an evolving topic, and it's really great, that we put so much effort into it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think when you present on it, that actually prompted me when you talked about that. Like, it's like these things change, and it just prompted me to go out and do more research on my own. I was like, yeah, I'm really interested in that because that's wild when you think about it, but it makes sense. And it's like, so we're talking about like the things that change are literally like the categorizations of the plants. I mean, we find out, oh, these were native here. Like we find out that there are more natives than we realized, or things get reclassified because we didn't, at first we might have thought they were non-native, non-invasive. Then we might've been wrong at one point in time. It's like, no, this is clearly becoming invasive. So it gets relabeled and such.
Or sometimes we've mentioned how there's certain plants like barberry is a big one that growers keep trying to revamp by creating new cultivars, because barberry is considered an illegal invasive species. You can't plant it in New York City, but only certain cultivars are listed. It's very specific. So if you're a grower and you make a new barberry plant that has a new jazzy name that has slightly different genome, then you can plant it again for a couple of years until the government catches up and makes it illegal again, So there's these like people are trying to cut corners around this a little bit. So you gotta kind of pay attention to that. It's a funny little thing that happens.
Yeah. And the impact of non-natives, which are not, or are invasive, that sentiment changes too. So like you gave an interesting example, and like I'll give another one is I wasn't want to botch the Latin name, the Tree of Heaven.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
one's
Bad.
Everyone's seen it.
But the thing is with it, the point is like I don't know, 10 years ago, it was actually like I'm not like marketed in public sentiment and design or like community was like, oh, this is a cool tree because it's kind of a weed. It takes its life of its own. It's prevalent in urban environments. It grows fast, so it's good hardy growth tree for a city environment.
Way too hardy.
But when you do the exactly when you do the research, though, it's like, well, this is actually doing a lot of harm to the balance of the ecosystem of any environment and the urban environment.
Yeah. As big as the world is,
because now it's very known for like, all right, it harbors like the Chinese lanternfly, like it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it even like releases some chemicals that like it prohibit growth around it for other trees and stuff like that.
I didn't know that about it.
That's I'm not like I've like read that and I was like I need to fact check it a little bit more.
That's
or
interesting
though. But it just takes, regardless, it takes real estate really quick, so it prohibits like other more balancing plants to take footholds and stuff. So it's just like interesting how you constantly need to do your research, but also just like I'll ask questions sometimes because maybe something's just becoming like in vogue as a plant, but like before I started saying like, I want to spec that plant a lot too. It's like, what is that plant? Where does it come from? Like, how's it gonna
what's
spread?
Going on here?
Yeah, exactly. What's going on here?
An easy way would just be to, again, like lean on your natives. They're so easy to take care of, especially, for a beginner gardener. They just require less maintenance, less pesticides to grow, less water. If you're not sure about what's invasive, just, lean on your natives. They're our friends.
Interesting. So, because we've been talking about a lot of natives' positive impact in maybe the ecosystem and how obviously it helps the balance that has already been, nurtured or already exists. Are there other hidden impacts in using non-natives that we're not thinking of?
I think maybe what you're getting at, there's certainly an impact on choosing native species versus non-native versus invasive, considering the fact that the plants we plant aren't created in a vacuum. They're not grown on site. They're grown from a nursery, and then they might be sent to a second nursery that grew the plug to a third, and then it's shipped again. There's a lot of opportunities for these plants to spread, so it really does matter what you're buying and where it came from, because it's very easy for these plants to get their berries eaten by a bird in Florida before they come up here. Like, for example, lantana is a very popular seasonal plant. It's very invasive down there, so even if it's not invasive up here, it's kind of like a hidden problem that you might not think about initially.
Interesting. That kind of is what I was alluding to. Are there maybe indirect impacts that we wouldn't think of in
Sneaky.
Our plant selection. Where do seasonals fall into this?
Seasonal, that's a great segue to seasonals. It's an awesome way to add some color and spice and like liveliness to your landscape. We usually define a seasonal plant, at least for us, it's something that we change out seasonally. So it could be an annual or perennial. It could be a shrub.
Good point.
So
Thanks
it's not necessarily like one type or species of plant category. It's really just the utility of it. For us, it's a seasonal interest. So in spring, it's going to be, pansies, or it could be an andromeda, which is a shrub, or, so.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying seasonal versus annual. So I guess where do seasonal planting fall in that when somebody is using something for a seasonal planting, maybe it's an annual or maybe it's a tropical, or maybe it's a like you said, a perennial, but it's not native.
It certainly still counts, even though it's in the ground for a short amount of time. Like we said, it's not in a vacuum. So if you can integrate some level of native plants, you're certainly doing the environment a great service. It's definitely a possibility, and we've done it here. There's definitely a way to integrate, planting some native species among your like flashier annuals or tropical plants. because like we were saying before, if you are shipping plants from far away where they're invasive to here, you're still contributing a little bit to the invasive species, no matter where they might be. But I think it really is about balance. Like if we can just do a little bit more, add a little bit more native, we can really do a big impact. I think I don't want to discourage people. It's really just about doing our best and thinking about it a little bit.
How do you approach your gardens? Are you like nothing but natives? Like, I'm just wondering.
I'm pretty native, but I have some annuals in my front garden, but I have some Angelonia right now, so I'm not even a purist myself.
Purist,
I love some color for myself as well. So basically, I have mostly native shrubs and perennials, but then I throw some color in there for seasonal interest because it's fun to plant annuals. It's a great time.
That's interesting. That's cool. I'm kind of aligned. I'll give you another shout out. I feel like your education works, and I think most importantly, your passion works. Like I've always been pro native. Like when I'm thinking about my gardens, but when I saw you, when I speak with you, you get really passionate about it, and that kind of spills over into me. So I definitely go. I feel like in the past couple of years, I've been even more on I really. If I happen to need to plant a tree or a few small perennials or something, I really do go there first. Do I always land there? Not 100%, but I definitely go there first.
That's great.
I'm let me research. What are the native options? Even if I have a plant in mind, I'll just hey, technology is great, right? I'll go to ChatGPT, hey, I want to do Japanese forest grass, but can you give me some native options that are reminiscent of this first? So I'll go there first a lot more than I used to. But I'm similar to you, so I'll go heavy native, especially with the backbone stuff trees and stuff like that. Heavy perennial, but I still like my moments of because it's we also don't have a lot of space to garden, so I like planting. I like the action of it. I like the nostalgia of it and the excitement of exactly. So I always carve out this couple containerized pots or a small section of the garden to be can do my annuals or whatnot. But
yeah, that's great. Yeah. I think that's really fun. It's a good balance that way.
Yeah. I was surprised. I thought you were going to be no, all natives.
No, guilty as charged. I also putting my hands in the dirt. I
that's the thing. I love planting.
Yeah. I like my front containers in front of our front door. Changing it out a little bit. Exactly. I do have red twig dogwoods in the front of my door.
There you go.
As well.
There you go.
And then the surrounding plants, I usually put in some kind of seasonal color, some pumpkins or something from the fall. Fun stuff. But again, it's that balance. And I think that's a great idea, what you said about just going online and saying, what is a New York native version of X plant? That's a great thing. It doesn't take an education to do that. If you just had this plant in mind, you could just Google it,
Yeah. There's a lot of resources out there.
There's so many. A lot of people are super passionate about it. This isn't a new topic by any means. So that's a super great way to start. Even if you don't, like you said, land on it every time, that effort. And over time, you're just going to gain more knowledge and you're going to end up with a lot healthier ecosystem in your own backyard. You're going to see more pollinators. It's going to be easier to maintain.
Yep.
It's good stuff.
Agreed, man. Love it. Anything else you want to add before we round things out?
Well, I'm just very happy to have someone to talk about plants with.
Nice. Native plants specifically.
Especially,
I know. We didn't argue that much, but I don't know. You said
there was no arguing. We did great.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's all I got at this point. I enjoyed this conversation. I mean when I said I see your passion come across, not just for plants, but also the specificity of native plants and their importance in what we're doing. So, and I just enjoyed talking about it with you. So thank you. Thanks for jumping on here.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here.
Big thank you to Chris for sharing his knowledge with us today. And thank you to all our listeners for joining along on this journey. And as always, a big, big thank you to all our clients at John Minnie. Without you guys, this is not possible. Your support allows us to make our passion our profession. Thank you. The John Minnie Podcast is the official podcast of the John Minnie Distinctive Landscapes team. This is a team of passionate individuals who are driven to make places beautiful. If you're exploring an investment in or need support on an existing urban landscape, we are the multidisciplinary team to talk to. We're ready to tackle any urban horticulture challenge, landscape, indoors, and or outdoors. We can serve your vision with our landscape design services, project management team for landscape construction, and custom wood and metal fabrication. We're also equipped to provide design and horticulture consultations internationally, something we've been getting into a lot lately, so do not hesitate to reach out wherever you guys are. If you'd like to learn more, please visit our website at johnmini.com or email us directly at info@johnmini.com and share a bit about your project. All right, this episode is a wrap. Hope you guys have a great day and take a moment to notice the nature around you.